The directors and stars may get all the glory, but it's the studio moguls and the top independent film distributors who really run the show. Join the Hollywood Reporter as we sit down with some of the industry's top executives to discuss their quest for success, both at the box office and on the awards stage. Joining us today are Walt Disney Studios Chairman Alan Horn, 20th Century Fox Film Chairman Jim Gianopulos, Universal Pictures Chairman Donna Langley, Paramount Vice Chairman Rob Moore, and Sony Pictures Classics President Tom Bernard. Welcome to the Hollywood Reporter Roundtables, the studio executives.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the Hollywood Reporter's Studio Executive Roundtable. I'm Pamela McClintock, this is my colleague Kim Masters, and to her left we have Jim Gianopulos with Fox, Tom Bernard with Sony Pictures Classics, Alan Horn with Disney, Donna Langley at Universal, and Rob Moore with Paramount. So again, thank you so much for participating. I really appreciate it because I know how busy everyone's schedules are. So we'll just dive right in. What developments over the past year, have made you most concerned about the future of the business and the challenges you all face?
Well, I would say the decline of the DVD hard goods marketplace. We are selling half what we sold, 5 years ago, and it makes it more challenging to derive the kind of revenue we need to justify making movies and paying what we need to pay to make them.
Because that used to be the revenue stream you could count on once you started the process. Like once you released the movie, at least you had a great handle on how much money was coming behind it. Now you're so much more dependent upon the volatile theatrical market in terms of the domestic, and international has grown a lot, but now so much of the business is coming out of the first market.
Okay, I feel like you're cheating a little. We've had a very tumultuous year in the industry. So let's think about the past year. We've seen, let's call it 18 months, we've seen turnover at how many? 4 of the studios. We've seen a lot of very big movies come and not perform. I'll make you, Alan, answer. You guys had a movie that lost almost 200 million or 200 million ballpark, Lone Ranger. Was that a moment where you thought this business maybe?
Well, I think the answer I would give you is that when we evolved to a business strategy of having tentpole movies, event movies, like The Lone Ranger. When they are profitable, they're very profitable. When they work, they really work. And when they don't work, they're high-profile failures. So all of a sudden, they're on the headlines of every medium. It doesn't mean that the strategy or the philosophy of making these kinds of movies is flawed. In fact, if you think about the international marketplace, where we are increasingly dependent, because the domestic marketplace, 2004, $9.5 billion. 2008, $10 billion. 2012, $10.8 billion. Everybody breaks out champagne. 2016, $11 billion. Internationally, $9.5, 15, 20, 27, and they're underscreened, so they're more selective. So the propensity to make larger pictures is greater than ever before. So when we have a big failure, of course it's disappointing and high profile, but it goes with the territory.
Well, I think that's fair, but, putting all the right ingredients, look, I had a huge movie star, pre-awareness property, a great director, all the effects, we've all had them. I think the difference is that we've allowed ourselves to make movies at budgets that exceed what our comfort zone was in the past. And the appetite of the audience, as Alan said, especially internationally, for big-scale, effects-driven movies is greater than ever. And it's easy to talk yourself into, okay, it's all there. How can it go wrong? It's gone wrong throughout the movie business history. It's just now, maybe the numbers are a little bigger, and you need to be a little more careful.
The key is when it works, and part of the reason you end up justifying and deciding to make those big investments is when it works, then you have 2 or 3 or 4 or 6 of those that have come behind it. And so that's the trade-off you're constantly making, is how much you're willing to put in up front, because in success, the global audience has continued to turn out for the big franchises and the big sequels.
I mean, I know some of your studios more than others are very keen to explore the question of premium, advance, on demand. How much can we charge? How much will it damage? Wouldn't 50 Shades of Grey almost be the perfect movie to experiment with if you're Comcast, because because of the content, which is so
I think that's a great
erotic.
That's really smart.
That's smart, very smart. You could watch it in your living room. I'm just wondering if Comcast isn't kind of like, hey, or NBC Uni, why don't we play with this one? This is a perfect opportunity. We could charge $100 for a ticket to see it ahead of time, and people don't have to go out and worry that somebody else is going to see them in the theater, or that their mom shows up at the same screening.
I think like any movie that has a sort of a white hot fan base. Well, we're hoping that the book's white hot fan base shows up to see the movie. But any movie, I think you could sort of pose that question. It's certainly but I don't think we're looking at 50 Shades of Grey as something that women are going to have, or audiences are going to have a hard time getting themselves into the theater. I think they're going to go in groups to maybe protect themselves, but I much like the book. The book started as a thing that people were embarrassed to read, and then it became, airport reading or beachside reading or poolside reading. So I don't feel like we have that issue. But in terms of we haven't had that discussion internally, and
But there is one big potential issue. Just having lived through Wolf of Wall Street myself and getting through the MPA process is the rating, and ultimately the book and the tone of the book and the rating. So if it were my movie and it ended up you had a situation where you're going to have an NC-17 movie that the audience would embrace, or an R-rated movie, that's when your question becomes a particularly compelling one, because you've seen that most theaters aren't capable or willing to deal with an NC-17 movie. So it is one other variable that could be in this movie that hasn't existed.
They claim they want it to be released in NC-17. Saying that, this would be the movie to push the boundaries.
They being exhibition.
Yeah, but it's hard to know whether that's serious.
yeah, I don't think that exhibition is excited about having something like that as NC-17. And it's certainly not the intention. If you were to have the worst case scenario, which is, try as you might to, shoot the sex scenes in the most modest way, cut them in the most modest way, but overall it just ended up being a level of intensity that was pushing up the rating. There are these other opportunities and avenues available. There are, there's some potential alternatives should it come to that, but that's certainly not the intention.
I'm sorry, Rob, what was the issue with Wolf of Wall Street in the NC-17?
Wolf of Wall Street has a lot of sex and nudity and drug use, and I think if you now see what the description is for the R rating, it is all those things, and it is a movie that the initial version was NC-17. Now ultimately Marty worked through the process and got to the R-rated version, but just seeing the issues we had to deal with, you just still see that there's a line where it's a very subjective process. You have no way of knowing when you're making a movie or editing a movie what the rating is going to be, and then you work through the process and you hopefully get to what's the best combination of the best movie and the best commercial rating you can come to.
Can you tell us what you changed? Was it language or was it nudity?
It was primarily about sex and nudity and what takes place in that world, where you're in a very over-the-top world in a very decadent section of what was happening in Wall Street in that time that he captures in a very graphic way at times. And so ultimately finding that place where that rating is a challenge. But ultimately he worked through it, and now he has a movie that is a very provocative movie, but certainly a very entertaining movie. So when people were concerned about how long it was, I think that won't become an issue in terms of the playability.
The NC-17 rating was designed for a reason, but it has not been embraced. And I mean, do you want 15-year-olds seeing some of these movies? I don't know. But the point is, it's box office death. Unless exhibition turns around and says, you know what, we feel differently about this, and we're going to embrace it.
I'll turn quickly to the Oscar race. How important is it for you to have a movie in this game? In your business model, for you, obviously important.
Yeah, it's incredibly important for us. And when we buy movies, a lot of the movies or make them, we have that in mind. We're a director-oriented company. Blue Valentine, Woody Allen, we saw that movie and we felt it would be in the Oscar, not Blue Valentine, but Blue Jasmine, we saw that in the long run as something. Ray Fiennes has got Invisible Woman, we feel we've got a shot with that one in some of the costumes areas.
Every line I have ever read, you are part of my existence. To the last hour of my life, you remain part of my character.
Everyone has their secret, and this is ours.
What about these barbarians in the not in the specialty business?
I think it's always highly prestigious and exciting to have a picture as an Oscar contender. But when you think about what it really means, think about Hurt Locker beating Avatar. Right. It's almost like having a best animal contest where a giraffe wins over a water buffalo. What do they really have to do with one another? Nothing. But still, it's a prestigious thing to have. And if you have one of these smaller movies, it can really mean something subsequent to the award.
Like even for Saving Mr. Banks?
Yeah, sure. Saving Mr. Banks is one. We'd love to have consideration. And of course, winning means something. But I think no one designs it, maybe Tom, but we don't design it in a business model where we certainly don't count on anything.
We look at it, but I think it's just to have all these movies now from the studios as well as the independents, I think excites the movie-going public. I think they're very engaged with the Oscar race more than they have before. The fact that the major theater chains will play the 10 best movies the week before the show is exciting, and so I think it really helps, the business in getting people off their butts again to start to go to the movies.
I think that's true. I think, look, we all enjoy the prestige. We all want to support our filmmakers. Quality, as we spoke about before, is always paradigm we reach for, even with our mainstream movies. And you have movies like Walter Mitty or 12 Years a Slave, which have been part of the conversation for a while, and then you have a movie, really to speak to Tom's point, like The Book Thief, which people didn't really see coming. They talked about it a bit, but now is getting more and more attention. That's an opportunity for people to see that movie regardless of the outcome. And so I think part of it is, yes, the prestige, and a lot of it is about having movies that wouldn't otherwise get the kind of attention.
I wanted to say quality is paramount with us, but it didn't feel right to say that.
It's a certain kind of quality.
There is no question that as in the summer where you're looking for big tentpoles, there's no question you love the opportunity to just find great scripts with great filmmakers. And this is a window in time where they have the best chance to be commercial successes. So when you're going to make a black and white movie with Alexander Payne, you know that there's another platform to help you in the marketing of that. Because obviously on television it's a little complicated, but when people start to hear of the response to the performances and how amazing the actors are and this movie, then it has a different platform to get elevated to say, oh, this is a movie that's great, and therefore I want to come see it, and the fact that it's black and white becomes irrelevant almost in this time of year.
I think there's a couple of different paradigms, in our system, certainly. We never set out to make an Oscar film. If something comes along that feels like it could have a shot because of the prestige of it, because of the level of talent that's involved, like, for instance, Les Mis for us last year, then, we certainly look for a way to make that part of our portfolio, but it's because we love the movie and we want to do it. And the consideration is really icing on the cake. And then you have other movies come along, like for us this year with Lone Survivor and Rush, where, you make them, you support the filmmaker, you find a way to get them done, you find a way to support them, market and distribute them. And then, you once you see them and you see the quality, and we're seeing this now with Lone Survivor a little bit, as it gets out there and people are beginning to talk about the movie, and it's such an important story, and, just finding the right way within the business model to be able to support that, and, because hopefully it does give uplift to the movie eventually, and then, yeah, so.
I mean, I guess I'm curious, what you can reveal. Are all of you having discussions about really restricting? I know we've written about this, but really restricting how much you spend on movies. Is that part of...
Tom, we know that you always have restricted, so we'll come back to you in a minute.
Yeah, I mean, I was actually going to make a point to your earlier question. I think a couple of other trends to look at that, may not pan out as trends, but it's the expansion of the calendar, if you will, the event calendar, starting so early now, as early as April. By August, September, are we starting to see a little bit of fatigue in the marketplace with films that, who knows, if the audience hadn't had their fill, of summer popcorn fare up until that point. Would they have done a little bit better? And also, sequels. We've sort of been enjoying in the last 5 years, I think, this sort of, as well as IP, if you create a franchise that, had a first good movie, the first movie being the sort of indicator of how the second and third might do. And certainly, for the most part, I think franchises have been growing. But, this year we certainly saw a couple in the marketplace that didn't work. Right. And I think, I think it points to quality. I do believe that, with what's going on in TV and the quality that audiences are getting to enjoy there very easily, I think it does put the emphasis back on the quality of films and the quality of storytelling in a big way.
One thing that I've noticed over just the last couple of years is the movie-going experience is very uneven around the country. And I think that exhibition has to really take some steps to make that experience different and better. There's a new audience that's coming up that I think is trained to stay home. They get their entertainment a lot of different ways. The delivery systems are unbelievable now. You can get a movie on your watch. And so I think that the exhibition needs to step in there and create this experience so people want to go to the theaters again, because I think there's a sort of a set movie-going audience. These people like to go to the theater, and I think innovations there will change things, and I think they'll happen in the next 5 years, but that's very key, I think.
Well, Donna, you just had Best Man Holiday, and it's one of those films where everybody goes, oh my God, people came to the theater, and it's an African-American movie, and we've seen this again and again. We were talking about how there's this impetus towards the big event movie that people have to go to the theater to see, and it's expensive. But when there's a women's movie that works, everybody acts a little surprised. But are you guys thinking now, well, maybe we actually need to have a more structured approach to developing these materials?
Well, I think to Alan's point, though, what we happily experienced with Best Man Holiday was it was a movie that was designed clearly for a very specific audience. Women drove the majority of the audience that showed up. And it was a movie that, for that audience, it was aspirational, it's positive, it was a group of actors that they hadn't seen together in a long time, and that was sort of an event for them. It was a movie that they had to go and see opening weekend in the theater. It wasn't one that they wanted to dismiss and wait and see on the iPad, when it comes out.
So you're saying that's a one-off, you can't just replicate that?
Well, it was sort of designed that way, but
Part of what we're all talking about is that events come in different forms. There are events for everyone, and there are events for someone, for a specific audience. And we had a great success this summer with The Heat. We actually sold tickets to guys if they wanted them, but, it was a mostly female-driven movie and not the usual genre that would appeal to women. It was just a great film, and I think it also had the pedigree of Bridesmaids, and Paul Feig drove it as well as Melissa. But so, there are ways to say this is an event for this audience, and then of course there are the big events for everyone.
When you go back to your question, which seems to be, does the frequency of failure or does the incidence of failure and the decline of home video contribute to a decision-making process that causes us to change that process? I would say it's never been tougher. It's the process is more analytical than ever, but at the end of the day, it is still kind of a gut thing, and we make movies.
Well, I think because of all those things, it is why you see less movies getting made, because the bar is higher for the audience. Like that, what it takes to make them think it's an event and believe it's an event and show up is getting higher and higher because they have so many great alternatives. So I think that's what the trade-off ends up being, is you're going to be taking less shots because you just can't afford to take as many, because the downside when they don't work is very high, as you pointed out.
You agree, Jim?
Well, yes, although, our strategy is we have 5 production divisions, and they range in budgets, in focus, in audience targets, in the kind of movies they make, and hopefully you find in that both creative diversity and financial diversity. And you put those two together, if you get it right. It's not easy and it's not perfect, and we certainly don't have it down, but it allows you to say, okay, well, Searchlight, this movie can be made at Searchlight for, pick a number, under $15 million. And that's a movie you take a chance on. And, similarly, you could say, well, okay, let's take a chance on Life of Pi and see how that goes. But yeah, I think if you manage both risk and creative diversity, you can find your way through it. Doesn't mean that there's any guarantees ever.
one thing we have gotten to is with the agents and the creative community of them accepting now those trade-offs. So when you're making a movie, even if it's for a studio, but it's a movie like Nebraska, it's a movie in black and white, they accept that there's parameters there for, even if Alexander Payne has had an amazing track record, says we're gonna take a shot with you on a black and white movie, that then there's a financial parameter that everybody has to sign on for to make that movie work. And I think there has become a lot better flexibility in everybody working together to figure out what is the way a movie can get made, even on the smaller, what would have been very risky movies, that everybody is then chipping in to say, okay, in success, we'll all make a very good return, but if it doesn't work, there's not so much at risk up front.
Come on, let me take you home.
I'm going to Lincoln. It's the last thing I do. I don't care what you people think.
Listen to me, you didn't win anything. It's a complete scam, so you gotta stop this, okay?
I'm running out of time.
You didn't even have a suitcase.
I'm not staying there.
Dad, I can't let you go.
It's none of your business.
Yes, it is. I'm your son.
Looking to you, Tom, how do you navigate right now, with the specialty biz also facing its own trouble? There's so many movies every weekend, and secondly, you have a parent company that is looking to, tighten the belt. So how are you managing?
Our belt's tight.
Do they know how tight it is?
Yeah, no, it's good. And what we do is we sort of go between the trees. We're like the swamp fox.
But what is...
we wait and see when a picture is, we think, well, this one's not going to have a long tail. We're going to go against that picture. We're going to go and try and get those theaters because this one's probably going to go not as long. And so a lot of our summer openings we do in August because we'll sort of, the studio pictures are really not the tentpole ones that are coming out then. So, and all the major theater chains have a dedicated, specialized distribution division. So there's a number of theaters that are constantly looking for movies. So for our world, it's we can stay in one theater a long time because those theaters a lot of times have something that caters to that specialized audience. It's not, we don't need the huge break and the 3 weeks to make our money back. We can go very long periods of time.
Now, are you frustrated sitting here with your colleagues that, the studios this year are sort of copying the specialty world and, opening a lot of movies in a limited fashion, sort of, directly competing with you?
No, it's great. Are you kidding me? This is the 10 pictures for the Oscars for Best Pictures, the best thing I think that's happened to our business in a long time because you've got great movies from the studios, you've got great independent movies, and the more good movies there are, the better it is for the audience because the theater's got to play something, 364 days a year. And if it's got more good movies than not, the audience is going to go.
Sony has just very recently said, we are looking for another $100 million to cut. Did they say not you, Tom?
Well, I think I'm not in the cutting room, but I know that they
Not that cutting room.
the company wants to sort of be lean, and it, I think get leaner, and so we are always we have 25 people. That's all we have. So we run a very lean organization, and if they ask me to lose one of them, I don't know. I guess we could do that, but. Things are going quite well at the studio now. It's I've been there 22 years.
You're talking about your particular label.
Our label, and even at Sony, just watching, the whole landscape of everything. It's you've certainly written books about Sony back in the day of
I have.
The early years, and it's probably running smoother now than it has since I've been there.
What about the specialty issue, though? Jim, your studio is the most committed, I'd say, with, even maybe more, I don't know, what do you think, more than Sony? Let's throw down here.
Well, I don't know.
We're different. We're different guys.
Yeah, but Searchlight's coming up on its 20th anniversary. It's had enormous successes over those years. Some of them in the greater than $100 million, and even recently, of course, now 12 Years a Slave, but Enough Said and other movies that perform very well in that specialized market. It's a crowded market. The theater structure is they don't play the same tracks they used to play, but the opportunities are there if it's properly managed, and they've managed to do that very well.
Solomon Northup is an expert player on the violin.
I was born a free man, lived with my family in New York.
Be good for your mother.
Until the day I was deceived.
To Solomon.
Kidnapped, sold into slavery.
Obviously, there's been a major change at focus, and sort of, in looking at what you want for the future, Why did you decide to go the direction you went?
So it started with the premise of really wanting to find a way to justify staying in the specialty business. We love Focus. We love the Focus label and the Focus brand, if you will. And what we were looking at was a business model that had that just really required some updating. The business model worked really well 10 years ago when the company was started. And that was primarily selling off international rights and leveraging, the downside risk of the movie that way. And so every greenlight discussion would start with, well, this one really can't lose money. And I began to ask the question, well, how do we make money? And so I was looking at the marketplace, and the specialty business is very different, obviously, to the main slate business, but it is a microcosm in some ways. And when I was seeing films like The Descendants and Marigold Hotel and so on, these big hits happening out of international, The King's Speech, and we have a whole distribution and marketing system set up over there that could handle these kinds of movies, had the bandwidth for it, plus TV output deals that were desperate for that kind of material. I thought, oh gosh, we better do something about it. But the structure of it is designed actually to protect the specialty business inside a bigger umbrella of what I call specialty adjacent and elevated genre. That's my fancy pants way of saying we need movies that make money, and then we can take some flyers on movies that are a little bit more risky and a little bit more avant-garde and artistic and creative, but with the hopes that we can also build some good filmmaker relationships around the world and so on. But that was really the thinking behind it. It wasn't to kill specialty films. So.
Right, and I mean, is it hard for you? Do you sort of wince when we all write, oh, the art house business is dead? They don't care about that anymore.
Well, I understand how the actions that we took could have resulted in that perspective and that point of view. And yes, it does make me wince because it really isn't the premise that we're working under. But that said, I've been there before when you guys have said unfair things about us, and it just creates a challenge. I say with no bitterness, it just creates a challenge. It actually, in a weird way, it's clarifying because it sort of creates it sort of guides us towards, well, we know what we need to do, certainly from a perception standpoint. And I'm very confident in Peter Schlessel and the team that very quickly, look, we've got Dallas Buyers Club coming out, which, it is a movie that was actually developed by the main slate studio, and we couldn't find a path to making it. We let it go. It was made independently, but we had a first right of refusal on distribution, so it came back to us. We've got Bad Words, which was picked up in Toronto, and all arguably under the old, Focus structure, but these are movies that would still appear on the Focus slate a year from now. So I'm excited about the future.
There's no question that there was a window of time where a bunch of money came in chasing the specialty market because it felt like the easiest money to invest in. If you were an independent financier and you suddenly had money you wanted to put in the movie business, and you look at a movie like Juno, you're like, oh, here's a movie that's made for nothing, grosses a fortune, I want to be in that space. Mm-hmm. So you had lots and lots of money come into that space, which created a lot of product in the specialty market over that window. And now you got the reality of the movie business. If you invest in a bad script or a bad story, you're not going to make your money back. Doesn't matter if the movie cost $2 million or $10 million or $15 million. So you did have a window where there was a lot of money came in, and now it's definitely settled back out, and maybe it's gone one notch the other way, and then it will sort itself out constantly to how many great scripts are there, how many really talented filmmakers are there coming up that you can invest in. So when you find the next Jason Reitman or the next Alexander Payne, you're like, oh, these are those guys we want to take a shot with. But you had a window of time where suddenly there was so much money coming in that space, you had a glut of product.
Well, remember March of the Penguins, go ahead.
Hits in the specialty business happen. You don't create them. It's a movie like Juno, you'd say that's going to be a success, but the success level of that movie is astounding. Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, or, Midnight in Paris. These are movies that happen. And what you try to do is manage the film to its success in a very economical way. And I think years ago, Orion Pictures had the theory of we're going to make $15 million movies. They're going to be critically driven, and they're going to succeed. And you can't make those movies. You can invest in the talent and the director, but you've got to not overspend on your productions to make it a profitable
I don't think there's any secret sauce. We can all name 5, 10, 15, 20 small movies, specialty movies that have done very well and they sound so attractive, but there are over 500 pictures released in a year and there are 400 of them that no one can name. So it's not that it's easy, it's just, it's very, very difficult. We're not in the specialty business.
We find the biggest challenge, you can be very disciplined about the production process, bring in an investor, keep the costs down, have parameters that are, well established, that Searchlight plays by certain rules about talent costs and so forth that over the years have been accepted, especially because the upside when it's there is there. The thing that's more difficult to control is the marketing side, because they're offered movies all the time for free. And yet the challenge of marketing in an increasingly fragmented media environment is more difficult than ever. That's where word of mouth, that's why you do see so many platform releases in that space. And the hope that, once a movie is launched into the market, people will talk about it, embrace it, and, continue to build. But that's the challenge. The discipline on the production side is easier than maintaining, that same discipline in marketing.
Sort of switching subjects, where do you see all the studios? Do all the studios exist as they are 10 years from now? I mean, what do you think the space looks like in a decade? Or 2 decades. I mean, or maybe 2 decades. It may take that. I mean, will there be a seismic shift?
There have been seismic shifts throughout history. I did a presentation one time where we came up with a device which was to put up some quotes that talked about how dramatically the business was changing and how dire this, the future looked and all that. And they were all from the 60s and some from the 50s. And you really look back and you say, we've been watching the sky fall forever. I think the studios will be here.
All of them?
Yeah, I think all of them. I think one of the things that, look, you could drive something into the ground, but I think at a certain point, the heritage, that's what's so different about the studios is our forebears have been making movies for 80 years. And those movies are continuing to provide entertainment around the world and continue to provide revenues, which sort of provide a base for the creative choices we make today. So if you can keep that concept going, I would expect that whatever happens in the world with technology and audiences and ways of experiencing movies, that you should be able to keep it going.
I would agree. I would argue that the major studios will absolutely be here because the growth and the big change in our business has really been international, and that sort of suggests that movies with size and scope and scale will be received very well for a long period of time, and not everyone can afford to make those movies. In fact, it gives the major studios a competitive advantage. It's hard to make movies with that kind of size, and the audience has come to expect special effects that are perfect. They've come to expect real, spectacular films when they are submitted. And international is where the growth is. We always say the growth is either through territories or technology. Everyone's raving about China right now, but there's only 1.3 billion people, but there's only 13,000 screens. They're building 10 a day. They've got to probably come up with 3. They probably had 3 already today. But we all talk about the growth in these markets, but they're under-screened, and therefore they're selective, so they like these big movies.
You have to be in a portfolio of movies. Like, you can't just come in for one movie and think you've figured it out, because you can have a great title and a great star and still have the movie not work. So the major studios do have that advantage in terms of having enough movies, in terms of what you're developing, and enough shots that you hopefully have enough that are big hits that are offsetting the occasional movie that doesn't work and occasionally doesn't work in a big way. So I think the one trend you're seeing that we'll continue to see, and I think it's good for movies in what ultimately people are going to be watching, is the bar is getting higher and higher and higher in terms of what it takes to get an audience out of their home to come watch. And as these kids who are in their teens and early 20s now are growing up, they are going to continue to be demanding the movie to be experienced to be great. But now you have the ability to get that movie anywhere, anytime, so the ability to consume it gets higher. So the hits have the value to become more and more valuable. But the downside when you have one that doesn't work is harder.
Well, Rob, you had one of the more spectacular saves of the year in terms of a movie, World War Z, that was supposed to be a complete debacle and wasn't. Is there a lesson? Do you guys look at that and say, wow, they're lucky, or do you say the lesson of this is fill in the blank?
I think one lesson is don't give up. I mean, what Rob and his
Never lose
team
hope.
did was they
Never
kept,
stop spending money.
They kept trying. Well, they kept trying to improve the film, and I think they deserve a lot of credit for doing so.
Yeah, I think the hardest thing is when you have a movie that's not working, of being able to figure out the answer, right? I mean, there's a lot of times you have a movie that doesn't work and you can't really, it may be unfixable. There are times where, however it happened, the characters didn't work or there's no chemistry of your cast, and that's not something you go back and reshoot. Here you had a movie where you could see where the audience got disconnected from where the story had been and what they were looking for. And so, fortunately, Brad Gray's been in business for a long time, so you had that creative trust with each other to make what ended up being the size of a movie that we reinvested to get the movie to the place it ended up being, right? It's rare that you're reinvesting $20 million in a movie you've already shot. But seeing what the issues were and then having that trust to say, all right, we're now going to go make this work. And then now you have the good and bad of how fast communication happens, because the word of trouble spreads very quickly. But then once we had the movie good, we could equally get the word out and start to screen the movie, and then people have now a capacity to share information that they never had before. Mm-hmm. So when you actually have good information to share, that can spread equally quickly in terms of people seeing the movie and saying, oh wow, this movie is actually really, really good. And so whatever the buzz was from moving it or from doing additional photography, in the past you may not have been able to overcome the negative that had already been out there, where now you do have the ability to show your movie and have that spread quickly to say, oh, this movie's actually really good, I want to see it. So,
did you guys feel that, I'm thinking about the big movies. I mean, honestly, Jim accepted, and Tom, you're not in this, but there's been a big troubled movie for the money of the studios, each of you. Is there a point where you said, Jim Knoxwood?
Look, way up the Lone Ranger again, are you?
I mean, was there a point where you think?
Well, I mean, there was a point where, there's a scene in the movie where a character cuts out another character, opens his chest and takes his heart out and eats it. And I did say to Gore, I said, Gore, when we said we wanted heart in our movies, we weren't.
You weren't that literal.
You're calling.
But you're trapped. I mean, at that point, you can't do it.
I think, first of all, I think it's hard to make any movie. I guess Beer Fest wasn't that hard, but it's hard to make any movie. And these are talented filmmakers. Everybody tries. The problem is the process is sort of imperfect. You have a screenplay and you greenlight from a screenplay. But if someone says, okay, it's going to be directed by Steven Spielberg. Oh, okay. No, it's Francis Lawrence. Oh. No, it's Chris Nolan. Oh. No, it's Night Shyamalan. And the picture in your head changes. Oh, it's Brad Pitt and Gwyneth Paltrow. Oh. No, it's Ryan Gosling and Emma Stone. Oh. Wow. It's hard. The perception of the picture changes every time. The variables change. But we're greenlighting based on a leap of faith. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
One thing, I guess, covering box office that I do get frustrated over is, sometimes you have so many movies, and I know the market can expand, but, some can also just get lost because they can't compete. So, will there be a point where we actually see event pictures in every month of the year?
Yeah, I think there's literally like 2 weeks in the year you can't really get people's attention. You can't get it the week after Thanksgiving, you can't really get it Labor Day because of just huge cultural things that are taking place in the United States. But a lot of times it's political, that our job's a lot of time is to convince a filmmaker we're giving them their best shot, and if nobody has succeeded on that date before, then they somehow think, oh, well, that's not a good date. But then suddenly a movie comes out, and like Hunger Games last year doing $400 million in March, suddenly it's like, oh, between Alice in Wonderland a couple years ago for Disney and Hunger Games, it was like, oh, March is now summer to a filmmaker. So when you now pitch somebody to open a movie in March, they're like, oh, that's a great date for me. But 3 years ago, if you pitched somebody in March, they would have said, well, I can't go in March. And so you're seeing that the business is expanding, but it just takes a beat at times to get filmmakers comfortable that this is a place that their movie can do as much as they're hoping.
I mean, I don't think some of us realize, how much control does the filmmaker have over the date, realistically?
Well, you're always trying to find a way that everybody's happy and that everybody feels like you're giving the movie its best shot, but it's complicated, right? And therefore, they don't want to feel like that they're not your favorite movie and that they're not going to gross $300 million. And if you try and communicate that in terms of how realistic you're being about a movie and what it could be, that's where at times then people can get their feelings hurt or relative to their expectations that you're not delivering what they were hoping for.
It's really tricky because, I mean, at our company, you know, we have Pixar, we have Disney Animation, we have Marvel, we have Lucas coming on board.
Terrible problem.
We distribute. No, but it's on this day. Thank you for your. We have Stephen and Stacy's pictures, and then we have our own internal things developed by Sean Bailey. And everyone, you know, it's an issue if everybody wants July 10th.
Right.
But we just have to navigate those waters.
Well, for instance, how did the Jack Ryan people feel when you pushed the movie to January?
Well, that is the combination. I mean, Wolf of Wall Street is a movie. You have Marty Scorsese, you have Leonardo DiCaprio, and for better or worse, that movie, the earliest in the year it could come out is December 25th at 1 in the afternoon. That's about as early as that movie could actually be ready. Like, there won't be any midnight shows. It won't be ready until Christmas Day. So that's a movie that when you look at the movie and the filmmaking team, that movie its ambition is a movie that hopefully will be part of the year-end conversation. That's the hope of that movie. So that will be part of why that movie is successful, is how critics groups and other folks rally around the creativity of it. It's a very aggressive R-rated movie, and therefore there are certain people who are going to need to hear that it's great to want to come out and see that movie. So that movie needed that playtime.
How does this actually work? There's a big money sign. They get launched at the time, they stick. This is their gift, okay? They're built to be thrown like a lawn dart.
1, 2, 3!
Stop, okay?
Safety first.
Safety is first. We don't want to get a bad reputation.
And I'm zoning, I think I'm possessed. It's an omen, I keep it 300. Like the Romans, 300. We're the Trojans, baby, we living in the moment. I've been a menace for the longest. And you know it, and you know it, and you know it, and you know it.
Then you have the movie that was at Christmas, which ultimately isn't going to be, that's just not the type of movie it is. It's a thriller, and it's a very well-made thriller, but it's not going to be on anybody's top 10 list. And so then looking at, okay, what is another good window? And now that's a place where we've had great success at Martin Luther King. So for us, that feels like, all right, for that movie, Martin Luther King weekend.
But how did they react?
Well, some of them feel like they're just natural reactions saying, wait, you're putting another movie where we were. Does that mean you love them more than us? That is at times the way that comes across versus looking at.
Do you say yes?
Here are the places that your movie has its best chance. And so that is, but at times, like I said, the analytical, practical part of it is lost at times in the filmmaking creative process where they just want to feel like you believe in their movie and you're going to give it the best shot. But at times it is very hard.
Now you've got Wolf of Wall Street up against Mitty, which is an interesting, Walter Mitty, Secret Life of Walter Mitty is
which is PG.
But it's more Saving. Don't you think you two are more competitive with each other between Saving Mr. Banks and Mitty?
Yeah, to some degree. I think it's a very busy, holiday season this year.
There's a lot of high-quality movies out.
When you make a movie like that,
everyone.
I mean, what is your thought process when you're greenlighting that movie?
That falls into that category of a portfolio management. It allows you to take, it's not a risk, but it's at a budget that's for a film that's original and thoughtful and intelligent. It's something that you want to make sure that you have a balanced portfolio that year. And then the movie comes out and you get to see it and you realize, thank God it's been executed brilliantly. And, some of that concern goes away. In fact, all of that concern goes away. And then it's about the marketplace. And it's about making sure that people understand what it is. That's why we debuted so early at the New York Film Festival. But at the greenlight stage, look, you have incredible comedic talent. You have a great director. Ben Stiller has truly become a very, very gifted and committed director. And it's a great story, and one that was in development for 20 years.
I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but is there also thinking Night at the Museum? That's a franchise. Ben Stiller.
Well, Ben's been part of our family for quite some time now, and certainly with the Night movies, we've all done very, very well. We're starting the next one soon. But yeah, you do have to take into consideration when you've had a relationship with a filmmaker of that stature, that they have passions, they have things that they want to do. And it's not the same comedy every time, and it's not just a sequel to Night at the Museum. That's part of it. But they want to stretch themselves creatively, and this was an opportunity to do it. But one that we welcomed, not that was any kind of, gift. It was a real great opportunity to make a film.
I'm going to call you later.
Okay.
The ice, Jace. She moves like a woman.
I'm Walter Mitty.
Cheryl. Melhoff. Where have you been?
Testing the limits of the human spirit.
You know, you made a big change in the last few years, went to a new studio. You know, you've certainly, had some changes recently. I guess you and Tom get to be the most stable at the table.
Tom, I don't know, you're risking your stability is shaking a little. I mean, not yours, but theirs.
I mean, 22 years.
Right, you've seen a lot of things.
And, Jim, certainly there's been some changes for you. I mean, how have you guys navigated that personally in terms of, who do you turn to for advice, or how do you just kind of get through it?
Everyone. You take advice wherever you can find it. Now, look, we have a very both experienced senior team, and they've been with us for a while. So we all sort of group together and make the best decisions we can. We consult different people for different issues. We get together for green lights to get everybody's point of view. But the only constant is change. And I think that a lot of attention's been paid to the fact that because we're such a high-profile industry, that executive changes have, people have made choices about going to other places and changes have been made. It's part of any industry.
Right,
it's just that we get, I think,
but
more attention. But do you think there's a reason most.
For this cluster in the last 18 months?
No, I think it's just...
We had turnover at Disney, a change at Warner Brothers, Fox, there's been change.
I don't think somebody, says, oh, they changed, let's do the same. It just, things happen. Over time, changes are made.
It's always this way. It's cyclical. It's happened since the history of the movie business. I mean, from the 70s, the 80s, just run down, and they change. People, generations change, people get older, people have new sets of skills. I mean, back in the old days, people who ran the studios didn't have high school educations. Now you've got to be...
owned them.
Yeah, and they owned them, yeah. Yeah.
I think you have to look beyond also this sort of equation of, successful studios having shakeups. It goes beyond just sort of market share success. It's about profitability. I can speak for my own studio. Our owners who are here for the long haul, they're here to invest. Our business fits very nicely into their portfolio.
So obviously talking about Comcast.
Talking about Comcast, yeah. I think for them, they were very happy with the way that the movie studio was running, actually. But it was really about, okay...
So happy that they fired the chair.
Well, no, but the question really was, so in terms of the product line is relatively stable. Yeah, there's some big, there's some big wins and there's some big losses, and there's volatility in that product line, but the understanding is that volatility is always going to be there. You can manage it as best you can, and you can make sure that you've got people around who know what they're doing. But how do you manage the profitability? And how do you find profitability in a business model that is changing, and the DVD market is declining, and so that kind of mainstay of revenue is going away slowly, but each and every year it's not getting any better, and the alternatives aren't coming in fast enough. So how do you look at the business from a different perspective?
We're talking about specifically Jeff Shell, who is an outsider to the business, coming to run Universal. I'm a person with no significant experience of any kind in the movie or television business. You're saying that what he brings is that fresh outsider's perspective on business.
Yes, exactly.
And he brings trust. I mean, a lot of this business is about having trust in the people and having that relationship. So Jeff is somebody who I happen to know from Disney, who then had some great successes at Comcast, so then they trusted him in that job. No different than Jim trusting the people who've done great work for him and putting them over domestic. So that is part of the issue, is getting that place of, all right, who are the people I trust, and I've seen that they can take a new situation and come up with an answer that works for the long term.
Yeah, and think outside of the box. And I would argue that he actually is coming to the table with some television experience, and he was, overseas in our operation for 2.5 years, and he's he certainly comes to the table with a lot of expertise.
And don't forget, it's not movie companies anymore. These are entertainment companies, and the stuff that's under that umbrella is so diverse and changing every day. I mean, I foresee gaming becoming a major part of the studios down the road. I mean, half the people in the United States are gamers.
I don't think we can overstate the importance of international as a component of the decision-making process and what we do and how we do it and all that. It really has represented the big growth opportunity.
Does that mean China will own a studio someday?
You know, I'll tell you what, I wouldn't bet against them. They will not be denied, it feels.
They own a theater chain.
Well, do you think they want to grow homegrown movies that do what American movies do?
Yes,
Nobody's ever done that.
Not easy.
Can it be done?
Easy.
Well, there's an expertise they're looking for, which certainly this collective group has the most of in the planet. So therefore, if that's an expertise you're looking for, it's a natural possibility.
Sort of turning to a more fun question that will pit Donna against Jim, is on...
That's your idea of fun.
I guess it's February 2015, 50 Shades of Grey will open up against a Nicholas Sparks movie. You know, obviously 50 Shades is probably like the most talked about, you know, project in Hollywood. I mean, how are you feeling about where it stands right now? And I guess the rest of you, you know, what's it like when a competitor has such a big, juicy movie going on?
Well, 50 Shades of Grey, without question, is a degree of challenge that is, you know, is right up there. You know, just from the subject matter to the phenomenon status of it. It sold 90 million copies worldwide. You know, 3 million alone in Germany, for instance, and it's the rapidity with which it did that really supersedes any other, you know, literary phenomenon that we've seen, and certainly anything that has been adapted so far into a movie. Again, the subject matter also raises the bar and degree of difficulty in terms of the challenge of it. But we've always had a thesis about it, and we really do believe, and I believe as a woman, and actually somebody who enjoyed the books a lot, just as a consumer, is the movie is about, it's a love story. It's a fractured love story, it's a tragic love story, but it's a love story. And the obstacle to the love is his predilection, which of course has its challenges in terms of how we film it and so on and so forth. But a lot of thought and care and attention has gone into that. But, you know, look, we're hoping for the best and we've planned for the worst, in all honesty. It's not an expensive film to make. And, you know, to our earlier point about events are creative, they come in all different shapes and sizes. I do believe that this is a destination event for women. And it was actually the reason why we moved it out of August, primarily for the international markets, because the book is white hot in those European markets. It's, you know, and traditionally, culturally, that audience is away on vacation. We didn't feel like we were going to be scooping up the women. You know, they're going to be distracted with their families on vacation. So, you know, we're going to be positioning as that destination for women on that date. So I think that marketplace, look, it is going, sorry. But look, I actually think it's a great date for both movies. To me, you know, it goes into President's Day weekend. It's certainly a weekend that we've seen expand in the past. So I feel like there's.
I know you'd love to see the discussion of whose book is bigger, but Nicholas Sparks is certainly a literary phenomenon, and we're quite a ways off. This was a recent development. We're very confident about the movie. He's sold. I know certainly that series of books is a zeitgeist at the moment, but Nicholas's books have been hugely successful for many years globally. So we'll see. I think what happens is, I think it's silly for anyone to say, okay, we're staying there or we're not moving or any of that. You see how films develop. You see how the calendar develops. You see what opportunities develop.
Hear that, guys? I think you might start looking at where he's going to put that movie.
You don't need to, you know.
Disney did not bid for 50 Shades of Grey.
But here's, you know, the reality is that, you know, both of those movies could succeed on that same date. And at the same time, both of them will overlap an audience. And so, you know, I think we'll both have to look at that.
There's a complicated part about the release schedule is, you get into that issue of you're making decisions a long way out, where they just moved their movie and they don't have a script. I don't mean to criticize them, just giving the variables, right? That they haven't. The movie hasn't started shooting, so therefore sometimes you make a reaction to the date and then they may move again for whatever reason, and then you've moved. So therefore there are times where you're going to wait to see what other information there is. But it is always hard when you're going back to your filmmaking team to say, this movie's a phenomenon, we're better off somewhere else. That is always the complicated conversation.
It's a huge challenge because dating of the movie becomes very important. If the average incidence of theater going in our country, biggest in the world, is 6 or 7 a year, and there's 100 movies from even the majors and a few large independents a year, that's 2 a weekend, and someone decides to pick a movie on a weekend, then another weekend comes by and they think, okay, well, I missed that movie last weekend, but whoops, here's another 2, plus another 10. It's challenging, so the dating of a movie becomes important.
And I just want to be clear, I certainly was not asserting that I was not making a comparison between one movie versus the other. Actually, my hypothesis is I think that weekend's a big weekend, and I think that there's room for a lot of products on that weekend. I really do.
Thanks, you guys.
Yes,
it was
thank
really
you very
fun.
much. Very
thank
fun.
you. Hope it wasn't too painful.
To learn more about the Hollywood Reporter Roundtables, visit thr.com.